First.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, survivors. My name is Billy and I represent PAG UK.
Billy, go closer to the mic. No, I didn't say dance with it.
PAG UK was established in 2012 in light of the epic failures leading to the grooming scandals that's haunted my town, our town. On a journey, we began to meet people all around the UK who, like me and like my team, wanted to change and were concerned for children's safety. I now class some of these people as friends, brothers and sisters. That's why I'm honoured to be a founding member of Survivors First and proud that me and my team are part of the Survivors First family. It was this union we decided we were going to push for change together. We invited you to Rochdale. It holds significance to our fight. Rochdale has been blighted with child abuse since 1960s and still prevalent today. But something has changed. We are now fighting back together. Let it be known, no paedophile is safe to operate in Rochdale. Let it be known there's a dedicated team looking to prevent child abuse both on the streets and online. And for those who historically abused, we want you to know we're coming for you too. Those people who historically abuse children, you're not safe, we're coming for you too. Time doesn't forget. And those who it's our goal at Survivors First to make our working model and take it on tour around the UK. We ask you all who's here today to join us, support us, promote us. We want everyone to know it's about Survivors First. As you can tell, I'm not a great public speaker, so I'm done. Thank you all. Stay safe, stay fit.
Good one, Billy. Well done, mate.
Next up is David. David wasn't expecting to speak today, but because he's such an inspirational man who I've met a good few times, I'd like him to say a few words. So thanks for that.
You've done all right there, mate. Well done.
Afternoon, everybody. I wasn't expecting to speak at all. I wasn't even going to come, if I'm honest. And I think what's important is that you don't hide and that you do come to things like this. It's much easier just to sit at home. And I thought, you know what, somebody needs to come and talk about the football and the sporting side. And I was a young lad, I was 12 years old, attacked by a wasp. And I was 12 years old when I was sexually abused by Barry Bennell. And when I went to police in 13, they didn't want to know. CPS didn't want to know, my case was dropped. They didn't believe it was in the public interest. I think they believe it was in the public interest now. But I got the guidance changed, got him convicted, and a process started. But it's important that people understand the power that these people have. I was talking to a couple of people before. I would have slept at that guy's house after about 20 seconds of being in his company. And I think that's what people have to understand is your football coach, your sports coach, whatever it may be, they are a massive influence on your life. And you ultimately, I've been a football coach myself, I've coached for about 20 years as well. They idolise you. You are everything to them. And it's important that somebody realises that. So that, you know, we've talked about the online grooming before and know who your children are speaking to. I think you have to understand the power that the coach has over your child, whether it be a boy or a girl. So make sure that you know what's going on. Talk to your child and don't leave them in a vulnerable position. You know, I was well raised, got 3 brothers, loved family, well brought up, and I was still sexually abused. And you know, I think it's important that people understand my abuser at the time was 24 years of age. This is no sort of old man down a back alley with a, you know, a big rain mac. He's 24 years old, absolutely fantastic, probably or possibly the best football coach in the country at the time. So if it can happen there, it can happen anytime. And people say it's historic. This is not historic. This is not historic. This football coaches will be grooming this weekend. And are we ever going to stop paedophiles getting within sport, within football? No, we're not. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that the people are aware, and events like this and groups like this are doing that. So I just wanted to come along, show my support, and thank everybody for listening. Thank you. So next up we've got Phil from Voice and CSA and also one of the founder members
Well said, mate.
of Survivors First.
Thank you, Danny, and it's a great honour to be a founding member of Survivors First. I was up on Saddleworth Moor last night because I'm no good with direction, even though I'm a van driver. And as I drove into Rochdale, I came through a great big bridge, and on that bridge said Rochdale, birthplace of cooperation. Where? The only cooperation I see is by those who've been sexually abused, and not by the council. So really, you ought to be painting over that sign and putting Rochdale, we don't care about you. Alright, now, first of all I've got something to say myself, and then I have a message from Chris Harper, who is the patron of Voice of CSA, and he was in that there Coro. Now, when I started campaigning and fighting child exploitation and abuse in the UK, little did I realise that the level of abuse suffered by children would be so deeply ingrained in society. Little did we know that the cover-ups and protection of paedophiles in places of such repute and high regard would be so widespread. But it is. And for the first time in history, those children abused are gathering momentum and speaking out, as is we are today here. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse is certainly beginning to lift the lid on institutional abuse, and we are hearing of the abuse of child migrants, care homes, the churches, and there's so much more to come with so many institutional investigations yet to take place. Yet it's not enough. It does not cover all sexual abuse of and in childhood. The abuse within institutions remains the tip of the iceberg, and in my opinion does not go far enough. Abuse outside of the terms of reference of the inquiry is far greater. And as voicing CSA, and now as with Survivors First, we continue to travel around the UK, we hear so many truths of abuse that those survivors feel that they have been abandoned, that they do not matter, and yet they do. Every child abuse matters, and every survivor deserves to be heard. If those below the waterline of the iceberg of abuse are not heard, how can the UK really end child sexual abuse? We cannot just clean up abuse in the office and disregard the abuse in the home. To truly tackle abuse, every voice should be heard. We constantly hear politicians discuss soft Brexit, hard Brexit, no deal Brexit, sorry to bring Brexit into this, and many other forms of Brexit, and it's like child abuse. It does not matter the form of Brexit. Brexit will happen just as child sexual abuse will happen. Just as every shape of Brexit is rigorously examined, so does every form of child abuse need to be. At the end of the day, Brexit will happen just as being raped as a child will happen, and we have to fight every form of sexual abuse of children. We have to raise awareness with the population that has no regard for what is happening in our society, and it has to be raised now. For if it is not, then the most important in our society today will continue to suffer the actions of paedophiles and paedophilia. That is, children today and children tomorrow, and no lessons will be learned, and they must. So I call on the government to raise that awareness, despite the shame of neglect that you have delivered to the children of our nation for decades. It's time to put your money where your mouth is, or hasn't been for so long, and publicly acknowledge what has gone on in this nation. Whilst the Queen has been head of state, we celebrate the anniversaries, the jubilees, the landmarks of the Queen being the longest serving monarch, and yet the abuse of children is being scrutinised over the length of the reign of Her Majesty, revered, respected and reviled by the actions of paedophilia, covered up under the watch of politicians of every party in power since the beginning of the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. It's an open secret that the fourth plinth is left free for a statue of the Queen on the death of Queen Elizabeth. And that is why it has remained vacant, with only temporary statues or works of art in place. And today I make another call, and on the fourth plinth there needs to be a statue of remembrance and awareness that so many children of our nation have been sexually abused.
Yeah.
Sexual abuse needs to have high profile awareness so that parents today will understand and comprehend that childhood sexual abuse happens, and it is the least suspected situations and trusts that make it possible. And through that public demonstration, it will be shown that our nation is fighting this, that we are fighting this plague, this pandemic, that stops our future generations in their tracks. To live a life without the pandemic of childhood sexual abuse is to become a valued member of society and live a life unhindered by a child feeling like their protectors, and safety is tantamount to hearing their face smashed into a wall by someone saying, "I love you," and then abusing you. Thank you.
Well done, mate.
The next part now is a message from Chris Harper, patron of Voice and CSA. And this is what Chris says. Since playing Nathan in Coronation Street, it's come to my attention what a massive cause this is. Many of the people that are here today fight hard for the many people who live in secrecy and shame. But it's a disgrace that more isn't done to help those in pain. It's disgraceful that more isn't done to protect children at risk today, and more isn't in place to protect children tomorrow. The numbers of people directly affected and represented by that Coronation Street storyline needs to be reflected in the support available to them. For this, there needs to be a shift in society. There needs to be an awareness in society of how many people are living with a background of abuse. This is not a fringe issue. Abuse does not discriminate. It doesn't care what colour or class you are. No two cases are the same, but the effects often have the same life-damaging patterns. Low self-worth, self-harm, alcohol and addiction, crime, prison and suicide. And on the way it can breed more abuse and more abusers, a growing cycle of grief and pain. While society fails to acknowledge the true scale of abuse and instead treats it as a taboo subject or a problem for a tiny minority, it fails to see one of the most widespread and insidious crimes. It turns a blind eye to the organised, systemic, selfish cruelty which exists on a much larger scale than a few children in care or working in tanning shops in Weatherfield. It's time society followed the lead of all the brilliant and passionate leaders here today. I think he means all of you. The 3 in 4 have to look out for the 1 in 4. We need stories of abuse on evening TV. We need free online messaging, campaigns, cartoons and websites. We need authorities and politicians to be proud to take our side, and then we need them to put actions behind what their words have started. Only that way can preventing child sexual abuse have something like universal support of campaigns like kick racism out of football, or the universal presence and understanding something that you touched on, like the Green Cross Code. Rochdale, you have a chance to lead in this, and we today remind you the world is still watching what you do, and we're not going away. And let's keep pushing elsewhere too. Taking the 4th plinth is a brilliant idea. Let's get this issue long-term and long-standing recognition. Let's bring it out of the shadows, end the stigma felt by victims and pass the shame and guilt on to the perpetrators. Let's get a seat right there in Whitehall, knocking on Westminster's door, an open reminder that we must destroy the secrecy abuse thrives in and moves forward towards a world where abuse can no longer exist. And that's from Chris Harper. Thank you.
Well done, mate. Well done.
Can we just have a quick spin around?
Could you change the guys, give them a rest? Yeah, nice one.
Red Pill Phil, like and subscribe, guys. Survivors first.